would appeal to pagans, but there's a side tangent. Anyway.
All right. Any view that you'd like to express before we conclude?
Yeah, I would just like to give you a chance if you've got any questions about the situation in South Africa to ask about them. Like one thing I'd say to people is they must realize that a lot of the stuff that goes on is isolated to certain areas. So you will get people from Cape Town who will have never encountered any of this before. I mean, think about it. Like if you're in the UK, you're not going to find grooming gangs in white areas. The issues that are there are specifically in very integrated areas, if you like.
So what's happening in South Africa right now? Because I heard lots of stuff, but I didn't have time to do research.
Basically what's happening is, like the whole of Africa, the only agriculture that's industrial is white-owned. And then what's happened is the government has decided that's oppressive and white men took the land, which is historically inaccurate in South Africa's case, at least. And so now they've been repossessing the land for years, but with compensation. Now they're doing it without compensation. Well, they're going to start doing it without compensation, and basically driving, the very farm-based white culture off the land. And it's a part of a longer-term tactic between like extreme diversity hiring for the majority and everything. Everything is. I mean, I don't even know where to start. The white person, I couldn't go to the police. I couldn't walk in the street in the day. I had security that's bigger than the bank has here at my house. So it's a very much a kind of the frog, the water is slowly boiling and the frog's in the water kind of situation in South Africa. So like my generation, probably about 40% of people my age and my generation, white South Africans, so early 20s, actually live outside of South Africa. So the reality is it's going to be everyone's going to be driven out in the end, but the only people who can get out
are the blacks of South Africa have decided to make South Africa an ethno-state and kick the whites out.
Basically, yeah. But this was, I mean, like about half of South Africa was never black territory. So I mean, it's very much uprooting a country that's as old as America. Yeah, the Afrikaans settled
District 9.
District 9 is very accurate.
That was a fascinating movie.
Yeah, it's quite entertaining. It was very inaccurate though. They kind of created a view of the basically it was not synonym. Yeah, basically the aliens were black people in apartheid South Africa. That's what the whole story was. But it was very much in a SJW kind of narrative perspective. It was never like that, but it was still entertaining.
But that's not how I saw it. Maybe you know more about the movie, but the way I interpreted it is like races are bound to kick other races out. And it was a beautiful beginning of the movie where you have black people talking about aliens in the city, and they're talking about them as a nuisance. And it's really shocking to see black people racism against extraterrestrials. To me, that was the brilliancy of that movie. I didn't see it as a metaphor where the blacks would be whites. I saw it as every people on earth as a people that they will point to and say, these guys are the problem.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, District 9 is named after an area in Cape Town, which was ethnically cleansed by the apartheid government. So, there was lots of synonyms drawn for, what happened before. Lots of the names were the same, lots of the characters and titles, and whatever. So for a South African looking at it, there was a lot of, ties to the history of South Africa, which was,
a
little bit like, they were pushing something. So, but yeah, it was entertaining nonetheless.
Someone on the chat says, plot twist, aliens were the real Kangs.
Gonna get them with their pyramid.
All right, so it's a situation. And do whites just leave? I mean, at this point, if you're telling me that it requires such a system of security to survive, have whites left, or do they stay there?
A lot have left. So, I mean, like I said, New Zealand's second biggest immigrant population are South Africans. And we're talking a country of, in New Zealand and Australia, 1 in 50 people are South Africans. So that's a huge amount that have moved there. Same in the UK. You'll find them probably in Canada a lot. Uh, I've got extended family across the globe. Everywhere from Thailand and China and UAE, all across Europe. But the thing is, it's a very specific demographic that leaves. It's the middle class that's emptying out in South Africa. So there's the very big working class of whites there who cannot leave because they do not have the qualifications to apply for visas in the West, and they have to
Okay.
compete with the whole world for the spaces to get into the West. And they are also kept out of work in South Africa because of extreme, I mean, what is called black economic empowerment. And basically, your demographics of your business has to match demographics of the country. So only
Mm.
9% of your employees can be white. So that's a very big problem for low skilled white employees because they're competing with the majority of whites who are educated. So it's very difficult. I would never be able to get a job there, even though I've got a university degree. When I get out, there's only so many jobs, and everyone needs to fill in their quotas. So that's why I left.
All right. Very worrying situation. I don't know
No,
what, do you have an estimate of the percentage of the original population that was there of whites that are not still now there?
yeah. So basically, there's about as many white people in South Africa as there are in Ireland. So about 4 million, give or take a bit. No one actually knows because the government can't conduct a census
Okay.
um, or anything else. But there's about 1 million who have left. But
Okay.
then also remember the people who leave are your most capable and they're the youngest. So all the whites in overseas are young families. So actually, what that means is there's a lot of old people left in South Africa. So
Mm.
it's actually much more serious when you look at the demographic pyramid where the people are leaving. Yeah.
Okay. And how
So
many non-whites are there in South Africa?
50 million odd blacks, and you've
Okay.
got the colored people who are mixed race people between the Bushmen and whites. So about 50-50 mix. And they're probably the same amount as whites, so probably about 5 million of them. And you've also got like Indians and Chinese and everyone else. So it's a beautifully diverse country.
I doubt I would appreciate being there. I think
No,
it's a weird situation to be in.
yeah, very, very wealthy, but yeah, doesn't help anyone.
Hmm.
Yeah. And for everyone in Europe who's worried about Islam, yeah, you can be worried about Islam, but that's not really what your problem is. Problem is
What's the
South,
problem?
not East. Africa.
Well, I mean, the problem with Muslim immigration, specifically for countries like France, Canada, and Sweden, is that they have opened their borders to Muslim immigration much more than South African immigration,
Well, African immigration in general.
African
Yeah,
immigration in general. Yeah,
yeah.
I
Well, I
mean,
mean,
because
I,
many
I spent my
Muslims
high
are
school
also
years.
Africans.
Yeah, I spent my high school years in the UK, so I'm very aware of the cultural milieu, and, multinational travel Europe. Um, but what I would say is Islam is the threat that makes itself known. But there was a case the other day in France where cannibals were eating the face of a living guy, and it was just like, okay, this happens in France, and everyone in the West goes, "What on earth? These people must be crazy." I was like, "No, it's voodoo. That's common in Africa." Like, I know what is coming, because I've lived it and seen my society destroyed for it, by it, and I would say just avoid everyone who doesn't belong in your civilization.
Yeah, I mean,
Islam makes itself known as an enemy. It's going to cause a backlash eventually. But much bigger problem is when you have to deal with barbarism as a majority.
I agree with your worries, but one reason I'm more worried about Islam is the birth rate. The birth rate in Islam is the greatest. And so for the
Um,
future, what this looks like is an ever-growing population.
your real problem then is probably the intersectional barbarians. People from Niger who have like 9 children, black Muslims.
I mean, I understand, but amazingly, on average, black people who are not Muslim make much less babies than Middle Eastern Muslims. It's
I would
fascinating,
be
and I
I'd be very
agree.
interested. looking at the demographics, if they're broken down by nationality, because
Yeah,
obviously Caribbean Black people are very different. African Americans very different to Africans, and
yeah.
I would love to know how much the Ghanaians are popping out the babies in comparison to, say, Trinidadians or something.
I know the stereotype you mentioned there. I hear it all the time. But it's fascinating when you look at the numbers. The Muslim faith is effective at transforming families into really baby producing machines. And it survives immigration to the West. It survives governmental programs that do reduce birth rates in whites. So that's why I'm worried.
Yeah,
Me,
but
when I look
all
at,
that I would say is it's very confrontational. It will cause a confrontation, and it's
you
soon
mean
enough.
Islam is?
Islam is, whereas
Yeah,
barbarism will just be the slow boil and never cause a confrontation because it's not seeking dominance. It's just the reality of life.
yeah.
So I mean
Uh,
that's the difference I would put between the two. But yeah,
yeah, but I there's also lots of most Muslims are not confrontational. Most Muslim,
no,
I would say, are behaving according to taqiyya, which is a word that I learned recently, but I knew about the philosophy before, which is
yeah,
like play it low profile while you dominate a territory.
yeah. But Muslims and Islam as a force are different. Islam as a force is confrontational. You'll get the people who are in charge, the Sharia Council or the Muslim Council of Britain or whatever, putting pressure on Theresa May to wear her headscarf. So now she wears a headscarf in mosques.
Oh,
They're
does
seeking
she?
dominance. Yeah, silly woman.
The cocking of Western civilization presidents and prime ministers is just it's shocking. Justin
It is.
Trudeau wearing Indian clothes when he did his meeting in India, absolutely disgusting.
I agree completely. What's so my mother's family are all Greeks from Greece, and what is magnificent is their opinion on Islam in comparison to the rest of the West. Because Greece is the only country that made it, it freed itself from Islam. All the other countries were freed by great powers, or in the case of Spain, never was fully conquered. And Greece was occupied for 400 years and declared independence on its own, and the
Wow.
only one to do so.
I don't
So
know much about this story.
yeah, it was a rebellion that started in the Peloponnese and spread north and whatever, and took 120 years to retake what they've taken now. But yeah, so a very fierce pride in that at the same time as they really hate Muslims. So they've been trying. The Greek government, who's um, run by a EU crony, is trying to allow mosques to be built in Athens, and so far, people have blocked the building of mosques across Athens. People leave, the Muslims will leave their shoes outside the door, and so the Greeks go steal all the shoes every time. So there's a certain hostility. We lived under a minaret for 400 years. We're not going to allow another one. So
Uh-huh.
it's quite cool. We've got the right people at the border. But
Yeah, I'm reading some about Arabization or the process by which the Muslim religion takes over countries, and it's very scary. I think it will happen to some Western countries.
yeah, there's actually a very interesting book. It is out of print. It's a book about the Nestorian Church of the East, which compiled in modern times just to show the history of it. And basically, it shows what the Middle East, Persia, Central Asia, all that area looked like, the Arabian Peninsula before Islam. And it was fascinating. These countries were, the majority of them were majority Christian, or in some case of Persia, maybe Zoroastrian or whatever. But even Central Asia is majority Christian. And what's happened is, obviously Islam has taken all that land and Arabized it. So it's a very interesting kind of warning to the West how we actually need to find a way of stopping this from happening ever again. You can't give up any more territory because they already have too much. So or reverse
Yeah, I
it,
think
as I
people
prefer.
often discard
Continental
these.
South. Yeah.
People tend to forget that Muslims have outbred nations before. For
They
hundreds
don't just
of years,
outbreed
this
them.
has happened.
They don't just outbreed them. My family are refugees, or were refugees. So, I mean, they were forced off the islands they came from. The islands they came from are now clear of Greeks, whether it be northern Cyprus or Imbros or Constantinople and everywhere else my family comes from. Those places have no Greeks anymore. So, and the reason is they don't. If you look at the genetics of it, the reality is there's been a replacement of population, not just a assimilation. They don't force convert or whatever very effectively.
Yeah.
They just kill people. So,
And I think
you know,
that's a missing part of the discourse when you hear people like Sam Harris, when you hear modern thinkers, they talk about convincing people of stuff, but they never talk about genes replacing other genes, which is what's happening.
yeah, well, they're still logocentrics who believe in truth over
Ah.
power. Whereas Islam is going back to dominance. And so until you can examine the difference between the two and accept the fact that they do not prioritize truth, they prioritize dominance, you can't actually understand the mindset. Mindset is always dominance. So, just as much as Sam Harris wants to find, his, the truth and whatever he's pursuing, the reality is, yeah, his, Muslim equivalent wants to find dominance and find a way of being more dominant. That is the whole mindset and whole hierarchy of values and belief is completely different.
So, what is your view as a Christian in terms of are you an apologist for Christianity? Are you seeking to convert people to Christianity or just to survive in your little corner of the world in New Zealand?
I'm not here permanently, but I wouldn't know what to define myself as. I don't actively try to convert people because I think that people will be convinced of the ideas if they like them. But at the same time, I'm happy to be an apologist or polemicist when needs must. It doesn't really faze me. I believe in my ideas because I thought through them, not because I've been told to. So I'm very happy to defend them.
All right. Well, it was a great talk. You're certainly not the kind of Christian I would criticize. I think that there's nothing in your view that invades on my capacity to teach science or my capacity to be an atheist. And so I'm not a militant atheist as far as contesting your views or telling you that you're wrong. You seem to have a proper and mature understanding of what your religion is.
Oh, well, I would like to say likewise to you, but I don't agree with you. But
All right. Well, thanks for coming. It
I
was
like
really
your. To be honest, I find your atheism very intellectually consistent because I find the people who say they don't believe in a god or whatever and must convince everyone of this.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't know. There's a strange dissonance. It doesn't make sense. Surely you
Militant
shouldn't.
atheism was doomed from the beginning.
Yeah, it was like, oh, it's quasi-religious. It's a bit weird.
Yeah.
But anyway.
All right. Well, thank you for coming. And you know your stuff, and it was great to hear you about South Africa and Islam.
Yeah.
Have a great
So
day.
all I'm saying is, all those civic nationalists who say Islam's a problem have only scratched the surface. But yeah.
Oh, yeah, I agree. Islam is just a manifestation, but genetic replacement by Islamic families is something.
Yeah. You don't have to convince me Constantinople is full of Turks.
All right. Have a great day. It was great talking to you.
Likewise.